Joyce Byrne is an award-winning veteran of the Canadian magazine industry. She is the recipient of the National Media Awards Foundation's Outstanding Achievement Award and is past president of Alberta Magazine Publishers Association. We also have with us today Lisa Whittington-Hill, who is the publisher of this magazine. She also works as a circulation, marketing, and fundraising consultant for small magazines, and is an instructor in the magazine publishing program at Centennial College in Toronto. Welcome, Joyce and Lisa. Joyce, I know you're starting first, so over to you.
Thank you so much, Asna, for that wonderful introduction. I have to say it's such a pleasure to be on this side of the presentation format for a change. So hopefully I won't disappoint, but the best part about this was working with Lisa on this. As most of you probably know, Lisa and I are longtime friends as well as colleagues. And the best part of having to work in the evening is when you get to work in the evening with your best friend. So I really do appreciate that. So we took this from a perspective of we're going to try and look at 10 things between the two of us that we did see over the last 2 years that are impacting the industry now and that we think people should be thinking about. So it really is 2 years, not just one, for sure. So we went over the webinar objectives. This is me. You can find me. LinkedIn is a good place to find me, and then I'll give you my email address if you don't already have it. I like to start with a quote. This is from Larry Rickman, who started the Colorado Sun a few years back, and Larry is really trying to bet on locally owned, civic-minded, reader-focused journalism. And I've picked this quote up in a profile of him on the Neiman Labs Predictions for Journalism 2022, which I have a link to in the end of my presentation, and I really recommend reading. So, you know, Larry's doing the good work here. He's really thinking about media in the perspective of the hedge fund journalism and the kind of journalism that is not great to have to be in an environment of. So my first point is we all need to be ready to pivot and be ready to pivot again. Change is inevitable. This is just a list of a few of the things that are in the news right now, a few of the things that are top of mind with people. I think we're all starting to hope that we're moving through the pandemic, but the truth is that there will be probably, and not too long, more global illnesses like the one we just experienced. We're certainly seeing the effects of climate change. They're impacting every element of our life and our business. We have military conflicts. We have the rise of populism. This week, we're dealing with massive technology change that could really impact our ability to operate in the social space, and also currently talk of recessions. So, you know, I think that if we look back a few years into the first part of 2016, David Bowie died. And that hit a lot of us really, really hard. I remember crying every time I heard Young Americans for a really long time after that. And, you know, we really started to say that 2016 was the worst year ever. It was followed by Brexit. It was the beginning of Trump's presidency. Prince died a few months later, and on and on. But 2017 was bad, and 2018 was bad as well. If you get a chance to read Andrew Potter's book on decline, which came out in 2021, the jacket notes have a very pithy way of summarizing it. What if David Bowie really was holding the universe together? And that's worth thinking about. A great book to read. And it's, you know, all this is to say is you're not imagining things. Things are pretty bad, but you're also not alone. I think there's hope. And I think that what we need to do is look for hope. And so what we have to do is have a plan, right? Maybe a lot of plans. So I think the first thing you have to have is a business plan. I think we often pigeonhole business plans as a startup exercise. And while some of your other ideas can live in your head until they are ready to roll out, a written business plan is a really important statement or restatement of where you are with your brand. Not to mention the effort to do a SWOT analysis, which is a crucial element of the business plan. It's always time well spent. There are some great resources in British Columbia for business planning. This is just one that I found from Small Business BC. Look at that great list of guides and templates. You can also look at some of our funders, and our associations as well have terrific references and resources on this, as well as webinars and even courses that you can take. I think Small Business BC has a course that you can take on business planning. The other thing that you should be thinking about now, you should actually be thinking about a lot of these plans, but a strategic plan and a business plan are often conflated or confused, but they are different things. A strategic plan is really going to tell you and tell your team, where is our business headed and how are we going to get there? In other words, it's a roadmap for your business comprised of concrete actions and milestones. It should be clear and simple distillation of what to do next. It should prioritize all your best ideas. And according to BDC, it needs to be actionable and easy to understand so your team can execute it and use it as a daily reference. So prioritize this and use those same resources that I mentioned on the last slide. They're good places to start for how-tos on this. As I said, BDC is an excellent resource for that. I wanted to mention production plans because as print costs are rising, fuel costs are rising, we're getting less and less choice within the paper industry. Supply chains are being impacted, the printers are being bought up. All of that to say that our prices are going up and up and up and up. Another thing that's impacting this is people's insatiable need to have things delivered to their houses in boxes that have branding on them, as well as packaged goods. So please reuse as much of that cardboard as you can. But also, it's having a huge impact on our industry. Magazines Canada recently hosted a webinar discussing some of the pressures on the industry, and I urge you to seek it out. It's really worth a listen. Even if you cannot find a way to stop this runaway train of print costs, perhaps you can get it a little bit under control. Being informed really helps. I recently went through an exercise of re-speccing a magazine with a printer. And I expected bad news, but they were really helpful. First of all, they explained to me why when we missed a press cycle, we were bumped weeks and weeks. They explained to us why we were having to buy our paper in advance. And a lot of that is because they used to be able to keep stock on the floor for you. Now they can't do that. The supply chain has changed as well. But they actually were able to find some savings for me. As I say, I wasn't expecting that, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And the proposed configuration for the magazine wasn't a huge drop in quality. It was different, obviously, but it did show some savings there for us. So talk to your printer. Disaster planning, oh my God. I think we would all like to forget those 8 weeks in 2020 when government lockdowns forced us to cancel absolutely everything, and we didn't know if we were going to make it through the summer. Since we know unpredictability is the only certain thing in this very uncertain world, I think you have to have a plan B for absolutely everything you do. Now is the time to get that into place. I mean, what if we had to stop doing our events in person again? Have you looked at your financial model closely enough to know, are we diversified enough? And if we were to lose this, even if we were to lose this permanently, if we were to lose this for a short period of time, would we be able to adapt within our organizations to continue serving our media, to continue drawing revenue from the other parts of the business? So making sure that you were not too heavily leveraged in one area of your business, making sure that one area is not too dependent on the other, all really, really important. There's other things you can look at as well. Your technology plan is important, even your operations plan, your computers for your staff and that kind of thing, your staffing model. Are you looking at creating a surplus? And I think Lisa's going to talk about some revenue ideas for that in the second half. I think the other thing is, do you have a culture and a process for developing new product ideas? I'm really interested myself in how other industries develop ideas, and particularly, if you look at like technology companies, there's a lot of chatter about how to develop ideas, that fail fast model. But I was really interested, as somebody who hasn't approached problem solving in that way, how we might adapt that for our industry. So last year, I had somebody from the design technology space, Doug von Spronson of Perset, that's in Calgary, who really loves magazines, come in and speak to the AMP audience about design thinking and some of the principles, the basics of design thinking, and how technology companies work through brainstorming ideas and developing ideas. And one of the things that really resonated with me was this how might we exercise, whereby you take a bunch of Post-it notes and a bunch of Sharpies, product placement. You take Post-it notes and Sharpies, and you go through this process that is in the 4 points on the left. So you're identifying pain points, and you're reframing the pain as a question. How might we question? And I've given an example here. Our pain point is our newsletter numbers aren't growing. So reframing that as a team, you might come up with, how might we make the sign up button easier to find? How might we change some of the content up? How might we come up with a new newsletter idea? And the goal here is to come up with not too broad, not too narrow, just enough ideas that you can pick out the ones that are right down the middle, that hit that sweet spot, and start developing ideas from there. So I encourage you to look on the internet for more information about this. How might we exercise, if you're not familiar with it, but also with design thinking. I think there's some really interesting approaches and ideas out there. And I'm by no means somebody who reads all those technology books and then gets them on the audiobook as well. I just, when I've worked with companies like Perset around developing an idea, I've been quite taken with the way they approach that brainstorming process, because it is quite different from your typical editorial meeting. Oh, advertising strategy. So I do want to mention probably the most important part of your business that you will need a strategy for. So you can see on the left that although ad spend in Canada was up very slightly in 2020, for the first time in 4 years, I might add, you can see it is predicted to decline through 2023. So it's really important to stay on top of your competitive position, your market knowledge, your product, your technology stack, your compensation package, all of it. And what's more, having a line on your other revenue streams will be key to recovery. So all those things I just said about your advertising strategy are really important, but also paying attention to the other things as well. What's your event strategy, and what's your subscription strategy or your membership strategy? Are you exploring those things? The other reason I really wanted to include this, A, because the numbers are important, but B, I also wanted to say, for those of you who are selling ads right now, it's important to know you're not alone. It is tough out there right now. Businesses are still experiencing the long impact of this economic downturn. They're afraid of what's to come because of all of the things I said in the first slide. And I think back to something somebody said and something else I attended this year, reopening is not recovery. So we have to remember to interact with our clients with empathy and to understand when they say no, that it's not personal. All of those things that they tell you in ad sales school, but they're important to remember. This slide will show you a whole bunch of other things in the digital space that are currently making money, with subscription revenue on the far left and micropayments and other things on the right. So there's display and branded content and events and e-commerce, all sorts of things in the digital space that publishers are identifying as important revenue streams for themselves. So this is an area of possibility for diversification for you. So I was charmed by this chart by the super talented Michelle Riel. She has a whimsical approach to information presentation that is charming and whimsical, but also really organic and very focused on self-care. So here's some ideas dying on the vine, I suppose, but we have hoping for the best down there, as well as all of the things that didn't work out. And I really, I think that this is an important thing to remember. Here are some of the reasons that things don't work out. Projects fail for all sorts of reasons, including, poor planning. I think we're all guilty of at least one of these things, but sometimes they're beyond your control. Here's another one from Michelle that I also just found adorable and charming, and also evocative of that whole Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take aphorism. This is very true. If you don't try, you won't fail, but you won't succeed either. So all you can do is try and learn from it and go for it again. So to go from the general to the specific, podcasting, should we bother? Like, is it too late? Should we get into it? I feel like you can't turn around without, somebody telling you need to listen to a podcast, or hitting a podcast that's like, oh, this is based on a magazine article, or this is a TV show based on a podcast that was based on a book. So they're kind of everywhere. And I'd like to say that you have not missed your chance. The good news is that this continues to be a fast-growing media. 2021 was the biggest year ever, with distinct podcast users on Spotify growing 34%, and expectations that 2022 will be an even greater success. So here are some Canadian numbers for your consideration. This fall 2021 survey, NLogic found that 1/3 of Canadian adults reported listening to a podcast in the last month. That's a lot. And nearly half reported they are listening more now than at the early days of COVID-19. So audience behavior is actually increasing attachment to this form. Gender skews slightly male, interest in news and science slightly older, with politics and history skewing younger. And most impressively, this is where we have to get excited, is advertising revenue on the podcast platform is expected to jump to $1.74 billion in 2022, which is up 31% over the previous year. So these are some of the popular podcast platforms for your information. Spotify currently being the most popular. It could be due to the fact the amount of money they're investing in high-profile podcasters like JR and Brene Brown. An observation about British Columbia, which is where we're broadcasting to and from today, hotbed both for producers, some of the biggest producers in the country and in fact the world, in BC. But people in BC consume more podcasts than anybody else in Canada. There's a bunch of approaches. I think that most of us would probably should we try doing it in-house? And that's possible. I have some resources after this. There's also the opportunity to work with an outsourced production partner, one of those big companies I mentioned, or a smaller one, or just a production house to help with the recording. There's sort of it's right across the spectrum in terms of how much or how little outside help you can bring into this. And then you can also work with companies that will market and sell advertising on your platforms as well. This podcasting resource, NPR has the definitive guide. All you have to do is Google, how do I start a podcast? And you'll get so many. So it's really, I think it's a matter of having some good ideas and getting the equipment in place, and then developing a plan, right? Take that solid idea and develop a plan. So moving on to branded content. I wanted to talk about branded content because it's an advertising type that is increasing in investment across the board. It's also known by a lot of names. So here in Canada, we use branded content pretty exclusively. In the US and internationally, it is usually called native content. So it's usually called native programmatic, native advertising, native content. I won't use that term because I prefer branded content. It's also called sponsored content, sponsored posts, and custom content and brand publishing. Custom content and brand publishing when you get into bigger projects like custom magazines, but certainly for the posts, which you'll see across websites, mobile, audio, video, programmatic, even events and other kinds of activations. And then the good old advertorial that you'll see in print is all part of this universe of branded content. I picked up a couple of examples from the Pressboard Learning tab. So Pressboard Media out of Vancouver, and they have a really vast collection of previous examples of executions that they've worked with for brands in North America, as well as publishers in North America. And the reason I picked these two is because I think that it's pretty easy to see here why they fit with the brand that they were placed on, what they were trying to achieve, and to be honest, how somebody who reads it might walk away feeling like it was time well spent for them, because it aligns really well with the audience. Back last year as well, I had the opportunity, no, this year, January 2022, had the opportunity to hear Melanie Diesel of Story Fuel out of the US. And she brought us a number of really interesting statistics related to this sector. As you can see, this is another really growing area of investment for advertisers around the world. Spend in the US jumped from 16 to 53 billion over 4 years. So it's absolutely huge. 42% of advertisers were using native branded sponsored content in late 2019. It's really a really growing industry. In this one graph that you'll remember from earlier, branded content is third from the left. It says subscription, display advertising, branded content, events, e-commerce in terms of the amount of revenue or the importance that publishers are placing on this right now. So it is a really monstrous impact on digital advertising for sure. We also spoke with Charlene Rook at that time, who many of you in BC will know from her time in BC, and she was able to speak to us about the ways that publishers can structure their teams so that they're able to produce this content. She has a tip sheet from many years ago. It was a 50-point presentation that she had, a hot sheet of sorts. So. Keeping up on top of the marketplace is really important in this area. It's important to understand the pricing of the product. So what is the market charging for branded content posts, both to host them, like what are your competitors charging? And how are you benchmarking the audience? What is the expected audience with these types of posts out in the world? What number of reads are people expecting to get? What are the technology stacks that are being used to deliver it and to measure it and to report on it? There's partners out there that you can sign on with if you want to have help with your analytics. Uberflip is one, Pressboard is another one that I mentioned. Even if you don't decide to go as a full content studio, I encourage you to look at how this type of advertising can be added to your mix. So if your website is monetized and your editorial and publishing model doesn't conflict with running sponsored content on your website or in your environment, I really recommend that if you haven't already added this, that you look at it. And that, this Statista and Melanie's Story Fuel work is a great source of data about this. This is what marketers know about this type of content, right? Readers are spending an average of 45 seconds engaging with this content versus 1.6 with a banner ad, and so on. I mean, there's just so much information out there that marketers are using to dismiss regular display advertising as part of their brand strategy and focus on this. So if you want this business, it's something you need to integrate for sure. So my last point is just on workplace culture and the question of like, where do we work now? What is work now? What is a workplace? What is a work week? What does productivity mean? And since I'm almost entirely working remotely, I have to lean on reading about hybrid workspace for this, as well as hearing what other people are doing. So this summary of a Gallup poll written up in National Wellness Institute Journal last month is based on a Gallup poll of US workers. And I thought it was really interesting and condensed some of the big key thing into 5, really nice cogent questions, a lot of which the answers won't be a surprise. So where are employees working? Most employees continue to work at home at least part of the time. What happens if we don't support remote flexibility, lower engagement, turnover, burnout? Why do people why do they prefer hybrid work or want to stay home? It's the commute time. What will the future work week look like? There's no consensus. So we're still fighting about this, as any of you who's trying to run an office probably knows. And how can we make hybrid work more productive and engaging? And I think that this is the big question, because this is going to require us to shift our thinking from effort-based measures of productivity to results-based. So people who have been in workplaces where their bosses have expected them to show up in order to measure whether they were working hard enough. This is an area that we're going to be challenged on as the workplace continues to evolve. And finally, the last thing related to the workplace that I did want to mention was equity, diversity, and inclusion. This is a topic that I think our associations can help us with as leaders. I think that we should continue to encourage our associations to help us with this training, but we also need to show up and we need to do the work. We need to listen and we need to read. We always need to be asking ourselves, what are the barriers that disadvantage some and privilege others? Who is missing from the conversation? And making sure that everybody has equal access to resources and opportunities. So I'll end with a quote. This is some guy. I've seen him on t-shirts. It's a pretty good quote. The only source of knowledge is experience. I think that that's a good place to end. I have a bunch of links that I'll include and I'll send around. I'll thank you again for having me here today. And I can't wait to hear what Lisa has to say.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Joyce. That was just chock full of so much valuable information. All right, Lisa, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to just thank you so much to Asna for the introduction and for hosting us. Thanks to Megs BC. It is great to be here. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. So Joyce touched on this a little bit, and I want to just talk about it a bit. So this is kind of my first lesson, and I call it "It Takes Two." And when I type that, I can't help but in my head think of the 1988. I don't know if anyone remembers the song "It Takes Two to Make a Thing Go Right." Okay, so I think of that song. So I say it takes two or more, and like I say, Joyce touched on this idea that you are not alone. And that there is hope. And I think one of the things, as we're sort of, dealing with the past few years and things are maybe reopening or there's so much uncertainty is don't go it alone. And that, to share resources and to partner with other magazines, to share resources, to share readers, to share workloads, to share success. And working together can be so much easier than going it alone. When I was a teenager and I was moody and I liked to isolate myself in my room, I had a family member who said, "Don't be an island, Lisa. Communication makes it happen." So don't be islands, communicate with each other. So if you're thinking about partnering with other magazines, what kind of things can you pursue? What kind of partnerships can you look at? But the first one to think about is circulation and marketing. So thinking about partnerships you can do with other magazines. And those could be things like 2-for-1 subscription promotion. And I have a couple of examples we'll look at in the next slide. Freestanding insert swaps, newsletter ad exchanges, print ad exchange, social media sharing, how you can sort of support and amplify each other's work. So I have a couple of examples here of 2-for-1 subscription deals, and we've done them over the years. There's something we're certainly doing as part of our circulation and marketing strategy this year, and probably next year. But this is this hot summer deal we did last summer, which seems like so long ago. What is time anymore, right? But this is one we did with the lovely Geist. So this is and Geist, a hot summer deal. You get 1-year subscriptions to both magazines for $29.95. And it was great to work with Geist on this. We did it cheap and cheerful. We didn't do any print marketing materials. We did newsletter ads. We did online ads. We did social media promotion with some boosted posts. Each magazine sort of sharing the boosting, sharing the cost of boosting. So working together. And then the other one I have is an older one that the Walrus and this magazine did together that we just did, again, online promotion, really cheap and cheerful. I think that one got like 170 new subscriptions. So think about magazines that you can partner with to share resources. You get to reach new audiences, new readers. You get to work together. Working together is great, right? We love it. Don't be an island. Okay. It takes 2 other things you can do: events. So do an event together. If there's a table coming up at Word on the Street, and a Word on the Street is coming back in person here in Toronto, maybe it's a 2-day affair. Maybe your magazine doesn't have the resources to do that. You're feeling tough after the pandemic, which is totally natural. Sharing a table, sharing tabling, doing joint events together, promoting each other's events. These are some things you can do. Working together on editorials. So content sharing, is there, stories, pieces of content you can do together, promoting and amplifying each other's content on social media, in your newsletters, sharing calls for submissions, literary content partnerships, or literary contest partnerships, tons of literary magazines, small magazines have literary contests. It's a lot of work to do a literary contest. Can you work together, a couple of magazines to do it, to share the work, that kind of thing. Advertising, are there advertisers, one advertiser and 2 publications? So think of some creative partnerships that you can do. And then Joyce talked about this, resource sharing, HR policies, returning to office policies. Maybe people are looking to share office space, that kind of thing. So don't reinvent the wheel, reach out to each other, share, partner, communicate. And I think this is all really important right now as we're sort of feeling alone and isolated. So remember, it takes 2. Sing that song in your head. I might be dating myself with that reference. I probably am. So it takes 2 or more. Okay, my second one, and I think this is so important, is about reconnecting. Now is the perfect time to reconnect with your readers and to remind them that you exist and to reach out to them. So I have this quote here: the most important thing publishers could do post-COVID is to make sure they understand and serve the needs of their audiences. And this is from Peter Houston, who's a magazine consultant. So think about this. Think about reconnecting and reaching out to your readers. So ask yourself, how has the way that readers engage with your content and brand changed over the past 2 years? It probably has, for sure, right? The way we consume, it's changed for all of us over the pandemic. So are they reading more digitally? Are they sick of screens? I know a lot of people sick of screens and craving print. Are they using social media more to connect? Do you want to, I say, TikTok it up here? Only if appropriate. Remember, this is a whole other webinar, but thinking about social media strategy and thinking about what is appropriate for your publication. TikTok might not be. But really asking yourself these questions: what has changed over the past few years with your readers? So how have your readers' buying habits and financial situations changed? So these are important things to consider for your advertising, your circulation, your marketing, if you're a magazine that relies on fundraising, for these activities going forward. And one of the things that I see magazines doing, and I get nervous about, is making assumptions. So don't make assumptions about how your readers and their lives has changed during the pandemic. For sure, everyone's lives have changed, but don't make assumptions. Instead, what should you do? ask them, and then ask them again. So now is a perfect time to check in and re-engage with your readership. You can do reader surveys, social media feedback. We're thinking of you. We missed you messages in the pages of the magazine, special renewal offers, focus groups. But, find out how your readers' habits have changed. Don't make assumptions. I was talking to a magazine and they usually do a fundraising campaign at this time of year. And they were saying, oh, well, we're not going to do it because, the pandemic, our readers don't have a lot of money. And it's really good to be mindful of that kind of stuff. But also you want to balance that with making assumptions about your readers. Okay, on that note, think about how you can strengthen your bond with your existing and new readers. And this could include things like membership programs. Again, a whole other webinar, but I'm happy to talk outside of this webinar about that. A lot of magazines doing them. Could be a thank you event, special subscription offers, sneak peeks. But think about how you can, figure out where your readers are at and then what you can do going forward to strengthen your relationship with them. See, now Joyce has brought cats into it. I see cats. I love it. So as readers come out of the pandemic with news fatigue and general fatigue, building trust, long-term relationships, and brand loyalty is really the key. So think about that. So more publishers, as I mentioned, membership strategies, membership programs, really popular. So more publishers plan to push ahead with subscription or membership strategies this year, with the majority of those surveyed, so 79%, saying that this will be one of their most important revenue priorities. And this is from a Reuters Institute study on trends in 2022, which I found really interesting. Lots of interesting stuff there. So don't be an island. Let's reconnect. And then number 3, this is really important too. As we start to think about events and things reopening, is don't assume that everyone wants to rush back to in-person events. I know that people want to see each other in person, but think about how the past 2 years have influenced your event strategy. And think about virtual events, which, we all pivoted to in 2020 when the pandemic started, but virtual events really offer a much more accessible experience for attendees, for speakers, content options, that kind of thing. So don't abandon your virtual event strategy in this kind of rush to reopen and be in person again. And again, if you don't know, what do our readers want? Do they want to be in person? Do they want to be virtual? What do they want? Again, don't make assumptions. Don't read your readers' minds. No one wants that. That's a little bit much. So if you don't know what your readers want, ask them. Again, ask them. And think about who you are leaving behind if you return to only in-person events. What are you missing out on? Number 4, I know that we all sometimes, for those of us on the newsstand, we like to kind of maybe, I don't want to talk about the newsstand. Number 4, be proactive about the newsstand. So certainly one of the things that has happened in the past few years is newsstand has become challenging, especially for smaller publications. Certainly stores were shut down for an extended period of time. Once they reopened, there was this kind of backlog of magazines, and magazines didn't benefit from curbside pickup during the pandemic in the same way that maybe book publishers did. Not that book publishers were making it rain and had bags of cash everywhere, but certainly they had that curbside pickup. So instead of letting the newsstand frustrate you, and I know we can do that, we go to a bigger retailer. I don't want to name any names. Is there any big magazine? I don't want to say any names specific. We all know who I'm talking about, right? But you go and you look on the newsstand and you don't see your magazine, and you see so many Us Weeklies and Vanity Fairs, and it really can frustrate you. So many throw blankets, scented candles. It's maddening, right? But think about creative solutions you can explore. The newsstand is not going to change, probably. Big retailers are not going to decide to, abandon all these mass market titles and start stocking only small magazines. It's probably not going to get better. So think about how you can work within that system and look at where are most of your newsstand sales coming from. And we were doing this at this magazine before the pandemic, and are especially really doing it now during the pandemic. But, if you're a smaller title, where are most of your newsstand sales coming from? And they probably are coming from independent retailers. So really put your eggs in that basket and focus on that. Don't worry over here about the throw blankets and the scented candles, but think about your independent retailers and how you can really maximize that opportunity. So look at low cost promo opportunities in these stores. And we'll look at some examples in a minute. But not only do these help you meet your readers where they are, most of your readers are probably shopping at independent retailers, but they also help independent bookstores too. You're giving them a bit of cash. And certainly they've been hurting over the last few years. So it's like a win-win for everyone, right? So these are a couple of examples. And again, I know we don't have a lot of time today, but I'm happy to talk outside of the webinar about this. But, these are some promos that this magazine did. We had a 50th anniversary 6 years ago now. Where does the time go, right? And we did this promo, these window promos in Atlantic News, a fabulous store in Halifax. They put us in the window. They did some promos in the store. And this probably cost us $150 to $200 for 2 months, which is much cheaper than it is to do a promo in Chapters or an Indigo. We got much more exposure. It gave them a bit of cash. It built a nice relationship with them. And it really was a great opportunity. And the other one I have here is a promo that we did, Type Books, here at Queen Street by Trinity Bellwoods Park in Toronto here. This was lovely. They set up this display. They did these little banners. I went into the store and saw this and I started to cry because I'm a sap. But they put the magazine out and these books by contributors, people that had been involved in the magazine. It was really beautiful, really personal, really nice. And I think we paid them $150 for 2 months. So, if independent retailers really are where your readers are, invest in that instead of kind of complaining about visibility at Chapters. I think that's really a much better place to put your energy. And, it's also a time as you're thinking about the newsstand, promote subscription sales. So now is the perfect time to promote find us on the newsstand, subscribe now and get us delivered right to your mailbox or inbox. Or promote your digital single copy sales or print single copy sales. And it's a kind of a perfect time to explain magazine economics to your readers and the fact that you get more revenue from subscription sales than you do from the newsstand anyways. So, kind of thinking about how you can kind of be creative with the newsstand and the challenges it poses and will continue to pose. Number 5, transparency is key. This is so important. Transparency is more important now more than pre-pandemic. So let your readers know how the pandemic has affected your publication. Be human, be honest. The pandemic, the last few years have been hard on all of us, and your readers appreciate that human aspect, that honesty. So talk about your challenges and opportunities. Try to strike a balance so your fundraising email or your newsletter isn't a big doom scroll, but certainly be honest with them about what you're facing. But there are opportunities and hope as well. And transparency also extends to your funders. Be honest with your grantors, your staff, your volunteers, your advertisers, everyone. So transparency is key. And then I have a bonus one, which I will do quickly so we can get to the Q&A, is Joyce talked a lot about advertising, lots of big points from Joyce. I think right now it really is tough. Joyce said this, tough to sell ads. It's a challenge for everyone. On the flip side of that, you don't want to give away all your ads. So acknowledge that your advertisers have likely had a rough few years and develop packages to suit their needs, which may have changed over the past few years and may continue to change going forward. So for example, at this magazine, we're developing right now a new post-pandemic ad package for small book publishers. That includes print, online, newsletter, contest options, a bunch of stuff for one kind of price. That is obviously a bargain for them. So we want to give our small publishers the biggest bang for their now smaller advertising buck. But again, like I say, reconnect with your readers and your audience, talk to your advertisers and figure out what they want and how your publication can help them. Again, it's all about working together. Don't be that island. It takes two. And that's all in your head. And that's kind of my bonus one. This is me. Thank you all for being here and for listening. Questions, comments. I really love to talk about publishing. I am a total publishing nerd. So please, here's my email, Twitter, Instagram. But I'm happy. I know it's we've covered a lot of stuff today, but I'm happy to chat about it outside of this. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much. That's me. Don't be an island. That's my one thing.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa. All right, it's now time for our Q&A.
Lisa, you talked about reconnecting with your readers.
Yes.
How are you going to do that in 2022-23?
Oh, that's a great question, Joyce. So I'm currently working on a strategy, kind of that what I mentioned in my presentation, the reconnection strategy. But I think one of the, right now we're really working on a reader survey. I think that's kind of our first step is we haven't done one in a couple of years, and certainly so much has changed. So a reader survey, and looking at doing that in book and online, so we get the broadest kind of audience possible. But I think first, doing that reader survey, doing some social media kind of, kind of asking on social media as a way to gather feedback. We're doing some special kind of renewal offers, that kind of thing, to kind of see where people are with renewing, engaging with the magazine, paying for it, that kind of thing. And thinking about doing some kind of like a town hall or a thank you event virtually and in person. We had our 55th anniversary during the pandemic, something that maybe we can have too. So kind of a strategy to make sure too that when we are reconnecting with readers, we're thinking about where they all are, our different communities of readers. Are they people that are reading the print magazine, or are they just following us on Twitter, or that kind of thing? So I think a reader survey is a great place to start. And kind of from there. Do you have any suggestions, Joyce, for things people can do to kind of reconnect with their readers?
I love the reader survey.
Yeah,
that's your basic. You got to have that. But I love the idea of meeting with people. Like having. Gosh, remember when you used to hear about the bigger magazines would take people out for lunch? They'd take a dozen readers out for lunch, and it's probably outside of our capacity as well as people's willingness. But could you send everybody like a sandwich and do a Zoom town, like a small group, like just a small group? And I love that town hall idea.
Well, I think too, any chance you have to ask your readers, I'm lucky at this magazine that we, we still do all our subscriber stuff in-house. So people actually call our office to renew, and I'm actually the one that answers the phone. And I use that as an opportunity to talk to them as well. You're renewing. How are you feeling about the magazine? How has the kind of, so any chance we have to kind of to interact.
We have a question related to readership. Melanie Ward says, don't make assumptions about your readers is really good advice. What is the biggest surprise you have discovered based on your own audience research, and how did it affect your decisions?
I think one of the biggest, it's a great question. And I think one of the biggest surprises we had is, certainly the past couple of years have been hard on people financially. And I think, it's like the example I used where the magazine was like, we're not going to do our kind of our fundraising drive, our campaign that we normally do this time of year, because we're assuming our readers don't have any money. And I was surprised at this magazine when we have done, I was kind of operating on that assumption too. And we have been doing fundraising, and, we have been actually, our fundraising revenue has been up because people are, I think we are coming out of a time when people have news fatigue, and there's so much misinformation out there that we are lucky at this magazine to have kind of, a news magazine, something people trust, something people are loyal to. And I think people are willing to support that. So, our fundraising revenue is up, and that's not what I thought. So that's certainly assumption about, and I had someone say to me, we don't have a lot of money, but we're willing to pay for the things we believe in and the mission we believe in. And I think that's really important.
I think it's what you were saying about not making assumptions about what people want to do with their money. And it's going to be interesting to see 2021 as compared to 2022, right? Because I know that I remember hearing that a certain larger circulation, general interest, thought leadership, Canadian magazine had a really successful fall 2020 campaign. I think I heard record breaking, I heard it was, so, but I wonder how people felt by the time they were in the second year of the pandemic, and whether the same messaging around we need your help to survive was still working.
I think you have to be, certainly it's a great point, Joyce. And I think you have to be, you can't, it's always that thing about, you can't kind of take it for granted. Our fundraising revenue is up, but it'll be interesting to see how that kind of, what the trend is over the next few years. But that's my biggest assumption is, that was one of the things that certainly I found surprising. Someone is asking about magazine printing. Is everyone paying for their magazine printing now? I just got my printer bill, and it is bigger than it was before. for
Yeah,
sure.
I know people, the printing alone jumping between 5 and 10% year over year, whereas you were looking at 3 to 5 annually, which felt opportunistic in previous years. It's just kind of like, can't you hold our paper prices the same? But now it's usually between 5 and 10. And I know, just speaking to a colleague today, who I think is on the line today, finishing especially really expensive, like bindery costs going up and up and up. So if you're getting that pushback from your printer and you're seeing that on your bill, you're not alone.
So ours went up, and it went up 10%. And we are also it went up, and we've also had issues with paper too, whether they've been able to have the paper to print the magazine. So certainly, I did kind of work the printing going up into some of my fundraising stuff. But ours was 10%.
Yeah. I think the other thing that people are going to have to grapple with is there's just less choice. And it used to be one of the ways that we could differentiate ourselves on the newsstand or in the marketplace was that we looked slightly different. Our paper was different. I remember when I launched Unlimited back in like the late aughts, how exciting it was to think about like, how would we differentiate the magazine with the production? And unfortunately, there's less choice now. Like there's just less paper choice. There's fewer mills. The paper's going to make boxes for Hello Fresh, and like it's mental. So we're going to have to lean on our design for sure, because the tactile stuff is not going to make it's not going to be the thing that differentiates us anymore. But it is an opportunity maybe for some of the smaller magazines who are in the same market and use the same printer. I mean, you're not necessarily going to be able to co-op your deals and get better pricing, but you might get something. You might be able to find that you can lessen the stress a little bit.
And I think it's a good time too. Like I did love getting my printer bill with a 10% increase. It didn't make my day. But I also think it's a time to kind of go out there and see what other printers, it'd been a few years since I'd gone to market and seen, other printer possibilities. So it's a good time to get some new quotes and see what else is out there.
Lise says, we are looking for any information or contacts on publications that have switched from controlled circ to paid. Any suggestions for who we could reach out to or resources to help with navigating this idea? Also, common subscription software for Canadian publishers.
So I have it on good authority that no magazine has ever successfully converted from fully controlled to a 50 or better % paid model. So, but it can be done. And I think that it's just a long process if you don't have the resources to do it. And it can cost millions of dollars, right, to reach brand new paid readers. So I would encourage you, before you jump in, to think about like, what would you be spending on mailing the magazine to paid readers, and what would that do to your revenue model, versus do you have a really awesome free distribution strategy that puts the magazine into people's hands and that delivers the value to people in that way? Because Heritage's programs are changing. It's not going to be as important anymore to be paid. It's what you're spending on content.
But it's a great point about those rules changing too around paid circulation and funders thinking around that stuff changing.
Yeah, I used to feel very insecure about working for business magazines because they were controlled versus paid. And I don't feel that insecurity any longer. And I also think that the content is the most important thing. So let's invest in that and get it into readers' hands.
If people have questions or want to chat about things, please don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to chat about this.
Yeah, I have a lot of links in my presentation, as you saw, and I'm going to dig up a copy of, or at least a link to Charlene Rook's presentation, and I'll send that my presentation to Asna. I think, Lisa, you will too, hey?
I will. I definitely will. And please, everyone reach out. We're we're all kind of in this together, and let's help and support each other. And, one of the things I love about the publishing industry in Canada is we all are all really supportive and encouraging and helpful of each other. So I would hate for that to go away given all the upheaval in the past few years. So
Thank you so much for
Thank
speaking
you.
with us today, presenting today, and thank you everyone for attending. That's it.
thank you everyone for attending. Good luck to everyone. Don't go it alone. There's hope. It's not all bad.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.